The hospital's entrance never slept. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Ambulances screeched into the bay. Family members paced in anxious circles, some clutching each other, others gripping cell phones like lifelines. Doctors came and went, faces stern, bodies weary. Amid all the chaos, no one noticed the puppy at first. He was small, barely bigger than a loaf of bread, with fur that had once been white but was now matted with dirt. His ribs showed through his thin sides. His eyes, though, were what made him impossible to ignore once you saw them, wide, brown, and searching. Nurse Emily spotted him first. It was close to midnight. She was balancing 2 cups of coffee in her hands, heading toward the ER staff entrance, when she caught a glimpse of something huddled near the sliding doors. At first she thought it was trash. Maybe an abandoned blanket. But then it moved, a slow, shivering tremor. Emily knelt down carefully, setting 1 coffee on the ground. "Hey, little guy," she whispered. The puppy didn't bark. He didn't growl. He just looked at her, blinking slowly as if weighing whether to trust her. Emily reached into her scrub pocket and pulled out a granola bar. She peeled it halfway and held it out. The puppy only sniffed it, then turned his head back toward the glass doors as if expecting something, or someone. That was strange. Most stray animals would lunge at food if they were hungry. But this puppy, he wasn't interested. His focus was somewhere else, beyond Emily, beyond the food, beyond the cold biting at his tiny body. Emily stood there for a long moment, her heart twisting in her chest. She had to get back to her shift. Lives were waiting. She left the granola bar on the ground beside him and went inside, but as she walked through the bustling corridors, her mind stayed with that puppy, sitting, waiting, alone. The next morning, Dr. Ethan Reyes noticed him too. Ethan had worked at St. Mary's Hospital for almost 7 years. He had seen tragedies unfold daily, accidents, illnesses, unspeakable losses. He had long since learned how to keep a professional distance. But that morning, as he left after a brutal night shift, the sight of a tiny, trembling puppy lying so still at the entrance cut right through his defenses. "What's your story, buddy?" he murmured. The puppy didn't flinch when Ethan knelt beside him. His small body rose and fell with each shallow breath. His fur was still damp from last night's rain. Ethan hesitated. He knew better than to get involved with strays. There were rules, liability issues, policies about animals near a medical facility. But something about the look in that dog's eyes rooted him to the spot. Gently, Ethan extended his hand. The puppy sniffed his fingers but made no move to come closer. His gaze was locked on the sliding glass doors as if they held the answer to a question Ethan couldn't hear. The doctor sighed heavily. He rose, pulling his coat tighter around himself, and headed for the parking lot. He didn't look back. But he thought about that puppy the entire drive home. The days that followed only deepened the mystery. Every evening, just as the hospital grew quiet with the shift change, the puppy appeared again. Always the same spot. Always the same behavior. No barking. No begging. No wandering. Just waiting. Some of the nurses started calling him Shadow. "Poor thing," said Mia, one of the pediatric nurses, shaking her head as she placed a bowl of water by the door. "He's waiting for someone. You can see it." "But who?" Emily asked. "He doesn't even seem interested in food." An elderly volunteer suggested calling animal control, but most of the younger staff voted against it. They didn't want the little dog to end up in a shelter, cold and afraid. Instead, they organized quietly, bringing scraps of food, small blankets, water bowls. A few even tried coaxing him inside the warm lobby, but Shadow refused. He stayed where he was, unwavering, as if he had made a silent promise to someone he couldn't abandon. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this. One evening, after a particularly rough trauma case, he found himself sitting on the curb outside, watching the puppy. Shadow lifted his head and looked at him. Really looked, and for a moment Ethan felt like the dog was trying to tell him something. "Who are you waiting for?" Ethan asked softly. The puppy's ears perked up slightly at the sound of his voice but otherwise stayed rooted in place. Around them, the hospital hummed, doors whooshing open and shut, the distant rumble of carts, the faint beeping of monitors through the walls. Life and death passed in and out of the hospital's doors like tides. But Shadow remained faithful, hopeful. Late that night, when Ethan finally dragged himself back inside, he found Emily hunched over a computer at the nurse's station. "Hey," he said. "Still thinking about him?" She nodded, eyes tired but bright. "I've been checking the lost pet reports. The shelters. Local social media groups. Nothing. No one's reported a missing puppy matching his description." "Maybe he was abandoned," Ethan said. Emily shook her head slowly. "No. I don't think so. He's not lost. He's waiting." Ethan didn't argue. Deep down he agreed. There was a difference between an abandoned dog and one on a mission. And Shadow was clearly on a mission. The following night brought heavy rain. The streets were slick and shining under the street lamps. Emily stood by the hospital doors, heart hammering in her chest, watching the downpour. She worried whether the puppy would come tonight. Whether he'd be scared away. Whether he was safe somewhere or whether he was out there, alone, cold, frightened. And then, just before midnight, through the shimmering curtain of rain, she saw him. Small, soaked to the bone, trudging up the sidewalk, step after painful step, until he reached his spot by the door. He curled into a tight ball, shivering violently, but made no attempt to find better shelter. Emily rushed out with a thick towel. "Oh, you poor baby," she cried, gently wrapping him. For the first time the puppy didn't resist. He leaned into her hands, too exhausted to care. Emily sat with him for almost an hour, whispering softly, promising that she and the others would find out his story, that he wouldn't have to be alone forever. Inside the hospital, a few other staff members watched from the windows, eyes stinging with unshed tears. There was something sacred happening, a small, fragile miracle, right outside their walls. They just didn't know yet how deeply this tiny dog's story would touch them all. The next morning, the hospital buzzed not just with medical emergencies, but with whispers about the puppy. Nurses, doctors, security guards, even cafeteria workers spoke in hushed tones, trading stories about the little visitor who braved a storm just to return to his spot by the doors. It was rare for someone, to bring so much light to a place so often shadowed by grief. Shadow had done that. By noon, an unspoken understanding had formed. Emily returned to the entrance with a warm fleece blanket. Mia brought a small bowl filled with cut-up chicken breast. Even old Mr. Hargrove, the security guard known for being gruff, left half a sandwich near the door, pretending he didn't care. Ethan watched it all from the observation window on the second floor. He noticed something strange. Shadow never truly ate much. He'd nibble at food here and there, drink some water, but most of the time his attention stayed locked on the automatic doors, ears twitching at every whoosh, every footstep. Waiting. Always waiting. That evening Ethan couldn't shake the gnawing in his gut. He finished his rounds early, grabbed a jacket and headed outside. The sun had just begun to set, casting a golden hue over the wet pavement. Shadow was there, of course, curled into himself, looking impossibly small against the sprawling hospital. Ethan sat down on the curb a few feet away. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice low. The puppy lifted his head briefly but didn't move. Ethan leaned back on his hands, looking up at the pink-tinged sky. You remind me of someone," he said. "My brother used to wait by the door every night for our dad to come home from deployment. Didn't matter if it was weeks late. He just waited." He chuckled softly, the sound tinged with sadness. "I guess hope is a stubborn thing." The puppy rested his head back down, eyes still locked on the door. Ethan stayed with him until the stars came out. The next day, Emily proposed a meeting. It wasn't official, but around the lunch table in the break room, a group gathered. Emily, Mia, Ethan, Mr. Hargrove, and 2 others from the night shift. "We have to do something," Emily said, leaning forward, her hands clasped tightly. "We can't just leave him out there every night. It's not safe. And besides, it's not right. We can't bring him into the hospital," Mr. Hargrove reminded them gruffly. "Policy. Liability." "I know," Emily said. "But maybe we can find out why he's here. Maybe we can help him finish whatever he's waiting for." Ethan looked up from his coffee. "You're talking about investigating." "Exactly." Mia nodded eagerly. "We could put up flyers. Post in local Facebook groups. Ask around. Maybe someone knows him. Maybe he belongs to someone who's here." The idea hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. Of course. What if Shadow wasn't just a stray? What if he was waiting for someone inside the hospital? Someone who might never come back through those sliding glass doors? They divided tasks. Mia and Emily would make flyers, bright, eye-catching, with a photo of Shadow curled up outside the hospital. Ethan offered to check with admissions and security footage, discreetly. Mr. Hargrove promised to ask the janitorial staff and ambulance crews if anyone had seen the puppy arrive, or if he belonged to a patient. Everyone agreed they had to know. Shadow deserved that much. 2 days passed. The flyers went up all over town, coffee shops, grocery stores, bus stops. Mia posted in several online community groups, describing the puppy, sharing photos, begging anyone with information to reach out. At first, the replies trickled in. "I think I saw him near the bus station a week ago. Could be a stray that's been around for a while. Poor thing. Hope he finds a home." Nothing solid. No owner. No leads. Only more heartbreak. Ethan dug deeper. After talking to a sympathetic admissions clerk, he got access to the recent patient intake records. It wasn't official, it wasn't exactly allowed, but he told himself it was for a good cause. He cross-referenced arrival times with the first time Shadow was spotted outside the hospital. There was a match. A patient admitted just 3 days before Shadow's first appearance. Female. Name, Lily Martinez. Age, 27. Status, critical. Ethan's chest tightened. Could it be her? That night, while the rain battered the windows and thunder rolled across the sky, Ethan sat beside Shadow again. He had a small box of chicken tenders with him. Real food. Something to offer, even if the little dog never took more than a few bites. "I think I know who you're waiting for," Ethan said softly, tearing a piece of chicken in half. Shadow lifted his head slowly, sniffing the air, then resumed his watch. "Her name's Lily," Ethan continued. "She's upstairs. She's very sick." The puppy's ears twitched at the sound of her name. Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat. He didn't know the whole story yet. Didn't know if Shadow belonged to her or if he was somehow connected in another way. But he felt, that he was close to understanding. Closer than ever. Emily found Ethan sitting outside at dawn, jacket soaked through, hair plastered to his forehead. "You okay?" she asked, concerned. Ethan nodded slowly, his eyes not leaving the puppy. "I think he's hers." Emily's breath caught. "Are you sure?" "I checked the records. Lily was brought in the night Shadow first showed up. She's been unconscious ever since." Emily knelt down beside him, her hand resting lightly on Shadow's damp fur. The puppy closed his eyes, trusting. "She must be everything he knows," Emily whispered. "His whole world." A silence stretched between them, heavy with emotion. Ethan looked up at the gray, misty sky. "We have to find a way to reunite them. Somehow." Emily nodded. "We will." Inside the hospital, life continued as usual. Patients arriving, doctors working, lives saved and lost. But outside, a tiny, determined puppy kept vigil, guarding a promise only he remembered. Waiting. Believing. The world outside St. Mary's Hospital felt heavier these days. It wasn't the weather, though the rain hadn't let up. It wasn't the shift work, though exhaustion clung to every staff member like a second skin. It was something deeper. Something smaller, yet weightier. The silent vigil of a little dog with eyes too wise for his short life. Shadow. Every day he waited. Every day he seemed to grow thinner, weaker, but never less determined. The staff took turns bringing food, offering shelter, but he refused to leave his post. And now they knew why. Ethan spent his break sitting at the foot of Lily Martinez's bed. She was a young woman, barely 27, with olive skin and dark lashes resting against hollow cheeks. Machines beeped steadily at her bedside, each sound a fragile reminder that she was still holding on. The nurses said she had been in a car accident. Severe head trauma. Broken ribs. Punctured lung. No family had come forward. No visitors. No one but the tiny puppy sleeping outside the door. Ethan rubbed his face, feeling the weight of the sleepless nights. How was it that a dog could have more loyalty than some people? He looked at Lily's hand resting on the blanket, small, pale, bruised. He wished he could tell her. "He's still waiting for you." That evening, after his shift ended, Ethan made a decision. He returned to the hospital entrance, found Shadow curled up by the door, and sat cross-legged on the cold concrete beside him. "You deserve to see her," he murmured. "You deserve more than this waiting." The plan was crazy. It bent the hospital's rules, maybe even broke a few. But Ethan didn't care. Some rules weren't made for stories like this. Ethan carried Shadow in through the staff entrance under the cover of night. The puppy was feather-light in his arms, too light, and Ethan worried about how much longer he could endure living on scraps and rainwater. Inside, the corridors were quiet. Most visitors had left and the graveyard shift had just begun. Emily met him at the elevator, her eyes wide. "You're doing it?" she whispered. He nodded. No turning back now. The elevator ride felt endless. Ethan cradled Shadow gently, feeling the dog's small heartbeat thudding against his chest. When the doors opened onto the ICU floor, Ethan half expected alarms to blare, security to swarm. But the floor was nearly deserted, bathed in soft, sterile light. Room 407. They slipped inside like ghosts. Lily lay motionless under the white hospital sheets, machines humming beside her. Ethan lowered Shadow carefully onto the edge of the bed. At first nothing happened. Then, slowly, the puppy crept forward, tiny paws making no sound on the crisp linens. He sniffed at her hand, whimpered softly. Then, with infinite gentleness, he lay down beside her arm, resting his small head near her hand, his body curled against her side. Ethan swallowed hard against the lump rising in his throat. The heart monitor blipped steadily. Shadow closed his eyes, his body finally relaxing for the first time since he had arrived at the hospital doors. Emily stood at the foot of the bed, tears shining in her eyes. "It's like he knew exactly where to go," she whispered. Ethan nodded, unable to speak. Some bonds, he thought, ran deeper than language, deeper than logic. This wasn't just loyalty, it was love. A kind of love that refused to give up even when the world said to let go. For the next hour they sat in silence. Ethan pulled a chair close to the bed. Emily leaned against the wall, arms crossed tight. Neither wanted to break the spell. Shadow stayed pressed against Lily, breathing shallowly but peacefully. At one point, Emily swore she saw Lily's fingers twitch. It might have been involuntary. It might have been hope playing tricks on their tired eyes. But Ethan saw it too. And for the first time in days, a fragile, stubborn seed of hope took root in his chest. The next morning, Ethan prepared to face the consequences. He knew bringing an animal into the ICU was a serious breach of protocol. He would apologize. Take the reprimand. It was worth it. But to his surprise, the hospital director didn't chew him out. Instead, Dr. Patel, an old, stern man known for his no-nonsense attitude, simply nodded after Ethan explained. "I'll pretend I didn't hear a thing," Dr. Patel said gruffly before walking away. Word of Shadow's vigil had spread through the hospital like wildfire. Staff whispered about the little dog who refused to give up. Patients asked about him. Families wept when they heard his story. In a place filled with so much suffering, Shadow had become a living reminder of hope. For the next 3 nights, Shadow was smuggled in after visiting hours. Each time, Ethan or Emily would carry him up to Lily's room, and he would curl up beside her without hesitation. And each time they sat quietly watching, waiting, hoping. On the 4th night, something extraordinary happened. Shadow was resting against Lily's arm, his small chest rising and falling in rhythm with the soft beep of the monitors. Ethan had his head leaned back against the wall, half asleep, when he heard it. A sound. So faint he almost missed it. A whisper of breath. A murmur. Ethan snapped awake, heart hammering. He leaned forward. "Lily?" he said, voice trembling. Her fingers twitched again, more purposeful this time. Shadow whined softly, nudging her hand with his nose. Slowly, painfully, Lily's eyes fluttered open. At first she stared blankly at the ceiling. Then her gaze shifted, unfocused, scanning. When her eyes fell on Shadow, something lit up in them, a flicker of recognition, of memory, of love. Her lips parted, a broken whisper escaping. "Max." Shadow's tail thumped weakly against the bed. He knew. He knew she was back. Ethan bolted from the room, calling for the ICU team. Within moments, nurses and doctors flooded in, working quickly to assess Lily's condition. Amidst the chaos, Shadow sat proudly by her side, refusing to move. Refusing to let her go again. Outside the room, Ethan leaned against the wall, heart racing. Emily rushed up, breathless. "What happened?" He laughed, an exhausted, disbelieving laugh, and scrubbed a hand over his face. "She woke up," he said. "She woke up." Emily gasped, tears springing to her eyes. Inside the room, the staff worked furiously, but there was a sense of awe beneath the professionalism. It was as if Shadow had carried her back across some invisible line, had refused to let her slip away completely. Later, when things settled, Ethan and Emily sat together in the staff lounge. Shadow curled up between them, finally fast asleep. "Max," Emily said, smiling down at the little dog. "Yeah," Ethan said. "His name's Max." A long silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of what had just happened. Then Emily said what they were both thinking. "He saved her." Ethan nodded, his throat too tight for words. Because he knew it was true. In a hospital full of medicine and miracles, sometimes the most powerful healing came from love. The hospital corridors felt different now. Brighter somehow. As if the walls themselves had breathed a sigh of relief. Hope clung to the air like the scent of fresh rain. Everyone who passed room 407 glanced in through the window, catching a glimpse of the girl who had woken up against all odds, and the tiny dog curled faithfully at her side. Max. No longer the stray. No longer the mystery. He had a name now. And soon he would have his story told too. 2 days after Lily regained consciousness, Ethan sat by her bedside, a notebook balanced on his knee. Lily was still weak, her voice barely a whisper, but her mind was sharp. Her brown eyes, so dull before, now glowed with life. Max lay curled against her hip, tail flicking lazily whenever she spoke. Ethan tapped his pen against the page. So, where do we start? Lily smiled, a slow, tired smile, but real. From the beginning, I guess. She had found Max abandoned in a ditch 6 months earlier. A tiny, trembling scrap of fur, so malnourished he barely resembled a puppy. I was driving back from my night shift at the diner, Lily said, stroking Max's ears gently. It was pouring. I almost didn't see him. She had pulled over without thinking, wrapping the shivering puppy in her jacket and cradling him against her chest. I was so broke, she laughed softly, the sound rasping in her throat. Could barely afford groceries for myself. But I couldn't leave him. They had become inseparable. Max followed her everywhere, to the corner store, to the laundromat, to the little patch of park near their tiny apartment. He saved me, Lily said simply. When I was at my lowest, he reminded me there was still something worth fighting for. Ethan listened, heart aching. It made so much sense now, the depth of Max's devotion, his refusal to leave the hospital doors. He hadn't just been waiting for Lily. He had been fighting for her the only way he knew how. Through loyalty. Through love. Through hope. Lily's accident had happened just a few streets away from their home. A drunk driver had run a red light. The world had shattered in an instant. Metal twisting, glass exploding, sirens screaming. Max had been left behind. The neighbors said he had escaped from the apartment the same night, bolting into the storm, nose to the wind, searching. Searching for her. He had found the hospital by some miracle, or maybe by instinct, and stayed. Night after night. Rain, wind, cold. Waiting for his world to come back to him. Tears blurred Ethan's vision as Lily finished her story. He set the notebook aside and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You know, he said, voice thick, I've seen a lot of things working here. But I've never seen anything like this. Lily smiled, eyes shining. I guess love's stubborn like that. They sat in silence, Max sighing contentedly between them. Outside, the city bustled on, oblivious to the miracle unfolding within the hospital walls. In the days that followed, Lily grew stronger. Her physical therapy sessions began, grueling, painful, exhausting. But she never complained. Not with Max waiting for her at the end of each session, tail wagging, eyes filled with pride. It was as if the little dog had become her lifeline, pulling her back toward living, step by painful step. The staff at St. Mary's had officially embraced him. Max had a handmade ID badge now, therapy dog in training, and a bed set up in Lily's room. Patients from other floors came to visit, asking shyly if they could pet him. He seemed to understand who needed him most, snuggling against hands that trembled with age or fear. He was healing more than just Lily. He was healing all of them. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in strokes of orange and violet, Ethan found Emily sitting outside Lily's room, a cup of coffee in hand. She gestured for him to sit. They watched through the glass as Lily laughed, an actual joyful laugh, while Max tried and failed to jump onto the chair beside her. Emily smiled into her cup. You know, I think we needed him almost as much as she did. Ethan nodded. Maybe hospitals needed hope just as much as medicine. Maybe more. Later that night, as Ethan prepared to leave, he paused at the entrance. The automatic doors whooshed open, cool night air rushing in. For a moment he pictured Max as he had first seen him. Tiny, soaked, shivering, but waiting. He thought about all the times he himself had almost given up, on patience, on hope, on believing that kindness still mattered in a world so often cracked and broken. Max hadn't given up. Neither had Lily. And maybe that was the real miracle. The next day, Lily's social worker arrived. She explained that Lily had no immediate family, no stable home to return to. Her injuries would require months of recovery, and support she couldn't afford on her own. Ethan listened, heart sinking. The system was cold. It was bureaucracy and numbers. It didn't see the small things, the things that truly mattered. Things like a little dog who waited in the rain. But this time something was different. The staff rallied. Word spread through town. A fundraiser started online, help Lily and Max find a new beginning, and within 48 hours, it had surpassed every goal. Donations poured in, from grateful patients, from hospital staff, from strangers who had read about Max's vigil and been moved to tears. A local landlord offered a small, pet-friendly apartment at a reduced rent. The diner where Lily had worked promised to hold her job. The world, for once, refused to let her fall. The day Lily was discharged was one of celebration. Doctors, nurses, even patients lined the hallways, clapping as she was wheeled through the hospital. Max trotted proudly beside her wheelchair, wearing a little vest that read, "Official Hope Ambassador." Lily cried as she left the hospital, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming, breathtaking beauty of it all. From the kindness she had never dared hope for. From the love she had almost forgotten existed. Outside, under the bright blue sky, Ethan helped load her belongings into a small car. Lily hugged him tightly, Max wiggling between them. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For believing," she said simply. "For not giving up on me." Ethan swallowed the lump in his throat and ruffled Max's ears. "Thank him," he said. "He's the real hero." Lily laughed through her tears. "Yeah. He always was." As they drove away, Ethan stood at the curb, hands in his pockets, watching until they disappeared down the street. The hospital doors whooshed closed behind him. But this time they didn't feel so heavy. This time they felt like the beginning of something beautiful. Weeks passed and the seasons began their slow, steady turn. The crisp air of early autumn swept through the city, bringing with it the smell of falling leaves and distant rain. At St. Mary's Hospital, life continued, patients came and went, hope was fought for and sometimes lost. But something had changed. There was a lightness that hadn't been there before. A quiet reminder that sometimes, against all odds, life chose mercy. That reminder had a name, Max. Every once in a while visitors would still ask, "Is that little dog still around?" They had heard whispers of the puppy who slept outside the hospital doors. Of the girl who woke up. Of the miracle stitched together by loyalty, love, and unbreakable hope. And though Max no longer slept at the hospital, his story lingered like a beloved memory. On a particularly bright Saturday morning, Ethan was in the staff lounge sipping coffee and going over his rounds when Emily burst in, her eyes alight with excitement. "You're going to want to see this," she said, grabbing his arm. He followed her through the corridors, confusion knitting his brow. When they reached the lobby, he stopped short. There, in the center of the hospital's main floor, stood a small group of people gathered around a bright, colorful display. A new plaque. Above it, mounted proudly on the wall, was a photograph. Max, sitting tall and proud beside Lily, her hand resting on his back, both of them bathed in soft sunlight. Beneath the photograph, the inscription read, "In honor of loyalty beyond measure and love beyond words. Max, the guardian of St. Mary's." Ethan swallowed the lump rising in his throat. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't realized how deeply Max's story had become part of the hospital's heartbeat. Emily nudged him gently. "There's more." She pointed. Outside, pulling into the hospital parking lot, was a small beat-up car. And out hopped Max, tail wagging furiously, as Lily climbed carefully out of the driver's side. The hospital doors slid open and Max bolted toward Ethan, who knelt down just in time to catch him in his arms. "Hey buddy," Ethan laughed, scratching behind Max's ears. "I missed you too." Lily approached, a little slower but with a bright smile. Her hair had grown back in thick, dark waves and her cheeks were full again. She looked alive. She looked whole. The hospital had invited them back for a special ceremony. To officially honor Max and to show gratitude to Lily for the hope she and her little dog had inspired. As the small crowd gathered, staff, patients, visitors, Ethan stood beside Lily on the makeshift stage. The director of the hospital, Dr. Patel, stepped forward. He cleared his throat, glancing down at the speech trembling slightly in his hands. "I have worked in medicine for over 40 years, he began, voice gruff. "And I have seen miracles made by scalpels, by drugs, by machines." He paused, looking at Max. "But I have never seen a miracle made by something as simple, and as powerful, as love." The crowd was silent. Listening. Feeling. Dr. Patel continued. "Max reminded us that no matter how advanced medicine becomes, no matter how skilled we are, healing is not just of the body. Healing is of the heart." He turned to Lily, his voice thick. And sometimes, it is the smallest heart that carries the greatest strength. When he finished, the applause was thunderous. Tears shone in nearly every eye. Lily stepped forward, Max at her side, and spoke into the microphone. "I shouldn't even be here," she said quietly. "And if it had been up to me alone, maybe I wouldn't be." She looked down at Max, smiling through her tears. "But he never gave up on me. Even when I couldn't fight for myself. Even when no one else could find me." She took a shaky breath. "Max didn't just save my life. He reminded me that even when the world feels broken, love endures." The crowd stood, clapping, cheering, many wiping at their eyes. Max barked once, bright and joyful, and the entire room laughed through their tears. After the ceremony, Lily stayed to visit the patients. She and Max moved from room to room, bringing light and laughter in their wake. In the children's ward, Max curled up in bed with a little boy recovering from surgery, his small body melting into the child's side. In the oncology wing, he rested his head gently on the lap of an elderly woman who whispered to him about the dog she had lost long ago. Ethan watched from the hallway, heart full. Max had never needed training to be a therapy dog. He simply was one, by nature, by heart. A healer in fur and paws. Later that afternoon, Lily and Ethan sat together outside on a bench, Max dozing at their feet. The hospital behind them buzzed quietly with life, but out here it was peaceful. Lily looked over at Ethan, her eyes warm. "You ever wonder why he waited at the hospital?" she asked suddenly. Ethan smiled, gazing down at Max. "Because he loved you." "Yeah," Lily said. "But I think it's more than that." She leaned back, looking up at the cloudless sky. "I think he knew I wasn't done yet. I think he believed in a version of me I hadn't even met yet." Her words hung in the air, soft and sure. Ethan nodded. Maybe she was right. Maybe love, real love, wasn't about what was, but about what could be. About standing in the rain for as long as it took. About believing even when there was no reason left to believe. As the sun dipped low, casting long golden rays across the pavement, Lily stood and stretched. "I should get going," she said, reaching for Max's leash. "Where to?" Ethan asked. She smiled, a real dazzling smile that lit up her entire face. "Home." Max barked once as if agreeing. "Home. A place rebuilt not with bricks or mortar, but with hope, loyalty, and love that had refused to break." As they walked away, Lily with a steady gait, Max trotting proudly at her side, Ethan stayed on the bench, watching them until they were just specks against the horizon. A new beginning. Born from a long wait at hospital doors. Born from a heart too stubborn to stop loving. Born from a little dog who had refused to leave. And in that moment Ethan knew something deep and true. Somewhere in the long mystery of the world, love always finds a way back. Always. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this story. If this touched your heart or made you think, please don't forget to give it a like. Share it with others so more people can be aware and learn from it. We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And make sure to subscribe to our channel for more powerful, emotional, and eye-opening stories. Stay connected for our upcoming videos. Together, let's make a difference.